Hey y'all, Scott here, and step right up to the birth off, where we fuse illegal gambling and pregnant women. Which pregnant woman will squirt one out first? Place your bets and let's find out.
Oregon.
It's a go.
Let's find out.
I've been ordered to issue an apology by the court of law. In no instance should childbirth be linked to illegal gambling. And if there's one thing that makes childbirth a drag, the prophecy. Please forgive me and don't set up a child birth off of your own. I must now stay at least 50 feet away from any pregnant woman and must complete 14 minutes of community service by informing the public on a much less problematic topic. Game console births and the titles that come with them. Shit, that's it? You can't have a game console without some games, so obviously you gotta launch with them.
Scientists prepare to launch the rocket with the Explorer S1 satellite as its payload.
With them. However, that's easier said than done. It's definitely tricky-dicky to land on a date where you must have hardware and a football field's worth of software ready at the same time. So usually one or the other or both are totally half-baked. So let's gander at console launches in days of yore and see how gross, lame, or surprisingly good they were. All of these will be North American launch titles and physical releases only. I'll be ranking them based on how good I think the launches were, taking into consideration the quantity, quality, and sheer variety of games available. And yes, before you ask, I'll address the rumor. I'll be using my patented 6-point scale and rate them as a whole. The Nintendo Entertainment System launched on October 18th, 1985 here in North America alongside 17 games in these slick black boxes. It seemed that Nintendo strived to offer variety at the launch of the NES with everything from sports games, arcade games, action games, light gun games, the whole 9 yards. Of course, nowadays I'd say a solid majority of these games haven't held up too awful well. I mean, I swear I've heard during Pearl Harbor soldiers could hear the term 10-yard fight ringing in their ears. 10-yard fighters. Some of these aren't too great, but with gems like Duck Hunt, Excite Bike, Kung Fu, and of course 10-yard fighters, it's hard not to appreciate the launch titles of the NES and admit that back in '85, this was a pretty solid lineup. The Sega Master System launched in September of 1986 with 2 games. See you later.
So I am confusion. Why is this one
so f***ing bad?
America, explain! Explain, what do you mean?
Later. The Game Boy launched on August 11th, 1989, and we'll take the NES launch titles and cut them in half, and then cut them in half again, and cut them in half, and then cut them in half again, and cut them in half, and then cut them in half again. The Game Boy launched with some very basic sports titles: 10-Yard Fight, Alleyway, an Arkanoid clone, Super Mario Land, a jank yet charming portable Mario game, and Tetris. Disregarding any other titles that launched alongside it, you had Tetris and Super Mario Land, the only 2 titles the Game Boy had to launch with, so the launch was decent enough. I think it was pretty solid, but could have used a few more titles and recognizable franchises. The Sega Genesis launched on August 14th, 1989, and this is definitely an improvement compared to the Master System. This lineup really felt like they were trying to highlight how the Genesis can perfectly recreate an arcade experience with titles like Altered Beast and a sequel to the arcade title Space Harrier. You also have Tommy Lasorda Baseball if that's your thing. Overall, mind-blowing launch, but one with
How you doing, you pirate?
quality titles at the time and enough variety to get a pass. The Game Gear launched in April of 1991 with this. The Game Gear launched and cut them in half. And then cut them in half again, and cut them in half, and then cut them in half again, and cut them in half, and then cut them in half again, and cut them in half, and then cut them in half again. All these are ports of Sega Master System games.
America, explain! Explain, what do you mean?
Which makes sense because the Game Gear is fundamentally just a repackaged Master System, but still, you look at the Game Boy and it had Tetris, which hadn't released on the NES yet, and Super Mario Land, major system-selling exclusives. The Game Gear didn't have that big exclusive title, really, so while this was a decent lineup of games, it honestly isn't the most compelling. The Super Nintendo Entertainment System launched on August 23rd, 1991, and crack open your quality containers and make room for 5 titles, because I gotta say, with the NES's overabundance of games at launch, the SNES definitely took strides to focus on quality and variety. 5 great games, all completely different genres. If I could ask for more, I'd say a few more titles would do it, but overall, this is a superb launch lineup. The Sega Saturn launched on May 11th, 1995, and whoa Nelly, what a botched launch. Sega was supposed to launch the Saturn in the holiday of 1995, but instead they decided to shoot the launch up to May of that year, and yikes, games like Daytona USA and Virtua Fighter simply weren't ready for launch, and Clockwork Knight, Worldwide Soccer, and Pebble Beach Golf Links ain't nothing special, that's for sure.
My disappointment is immeasurable, and my day is ruined.
The standout title of the bunch is definitely Panzer Dragoon, but even that couldn't save how botched this launch was. It basically killed Sega. The PlayStation launched on September 9th, 1995, and my oh my, some solid variety and quality.
Little slam jam bam, a little dipsy-doo dunkaroo, a little dunking contest.
Ridge Racer, Rayman, Battle Arena Toshinden, The Raiden Project, NBA Jam, the list goes on. Nothing crazy, but definitely some decent stuff. And you're gonna have to excuse me on this one. I was never a PS1 guy at all, but from what I know, this was pretty solid. The Nintendo 64 launched on September 29th, 1996, and this is embarrassing. Nintendo home console launches just got smaller and smaller until blam, two-title launch event, have at it. Mario 64 and Pilot Wing 64. Sure, one is the most revolutionary games of all time, and the other is Mario 64, but
Got him! Got him!
my god, only two titles? Not a lot of variety here at all. If these two titles weren't as quality as they were, we'd have a bit of an issue here. Alas, these are two very decent games to launch with, and in many folks' cases, Mario 64 is the only one they ever needed. But you have to admit, the launch could have had a few more titles. The Game Boy Color launched on November 19th, 1998, and cough cough, this is anemic. Tetris DX, it's Tetris, but in color, hooray, what a revolution. Game & Watch Gallery 2, it's a bunch of LCD Game & Watch games remade on the Game Boy Color. Egads, a revolution is upon us. Pocket Bomberman, a new Bomberman game, eh? Does somebody smell a revolution? Centipede. It's fucking Centipede. The Game Boy Color has got to have one of the lamest launches ever. Yeah, these are all solid games, but these in no way give you a reason to pick up a Game Boy Color if you already have a Game Boy.
America,
Plus, these are
explain!
games that are like way past old or very, very similar to older games. Why no new titles? The Sega Dreamcast launched on September 9th, 1999, and this is how you do a console launch. Sega learned their lesson from the Saturn and crammed as much quality as they could into the Dreamcast's big day. So much variety, loads of games, and so many quality titles. Sonic Adventure, Sonic Big Parade, and 3D was a classic, great game. Soul Calibur, an amazing 3D fighting game. Power Stone, a spectacular multiplayer party fighter. House of the Dead 2 and Hydro Thunder, great arcade games. The Dreamcast had a pretty banging launch, to say the least. The Xbox launched on November 15th, 2001.
The prophecy.
On their first outing in the console market. Halo, Oddworld, Munch's Odyssey, Project Gotham Racing, Fusion Frenzy, all at launch. That's pretty solid, including stuff like Cell Damage, Dead or Alive 3, and Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2X. It's a bit oversaturated with sports games, but for a first console, this was a pretty solid launch. Get Ping Pals! Feel the magic, this blows. Well, that was definitely community service, and 14 minutes of it. Anyways, I have places to do and things to be. I think I'm gonna go heckle some dogs at the pound. It's gonna be hilarious. When will I ever learn?